They say life begins at 40. But what if that wasn't just a comforting phrase? What if it was a psychological truth? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, believed that everything before 40 is merely preparation. Just the rehearsal. Up until that moment, you are gathering tools, experiences, wounds, masks, without yet knowing who you truly are. And then, something begins to stir. At 40, the questions become sharper. The noise of ambition softens, and a quiet voice inside starts to speak. You begin to feel the weight of things you used to ignore. Time, meaning, regret, longing. The person you presented to the world for so long suddenly feels like a stranger, and for the first time you ask yourself, not what others expect of you, but who you are beneath it all. This is not a crisis. It's a calling. In this video, we will go deep into Jung's vision of the second half of life, an era not of decline, but of transformation. You'll see why the first 40 years are not wasted, but necessary, and how the real journey begins not with answers, but with deeper questions. Because beyond youth and success lies something far more powerful, the rediscovery of the soul. Let's begin. The mask we wear until 40. Before the age of 40, most of us live in what Carl Jung called the first half of life. It is a period not defined by inner truth, but by adaptation, by building what he described as the persona, the social mask we wear to meet the expectations of the world. This persona is not necessarily a lie. It's a necessary tool, a form of survival. We learn how to behave, how to succeed, how to fit into society's frameworks. We shape our careers, our families, our identities. We find roles to play: the achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the perfectionist. We become good at them. Some of us even become admired for them. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, we forget that the mask is not our face. We start mistaking the performance for the person. This is not a flaw. It's part of development. As Jung understood, the ego must be built before it can be questioned. You cannot transcend a self that has not yet been formed. The first half of life is the construction of the self-image, and like all buildings, it must rise before it can be examined for cracks. But what happens when the structure no longer fits? Somewhere along the way, often in our late 30s or early 40s, something starts to shift. The strategies that once worked begin to lose their power. You meet success, but it no longer satisfies you. You reach your goals, but feel a strange emptiness. You find yourself in a relationship, in a home, in a life that seems complete on paper, yet feels distant in the heart. That is the beginning of the turning point. It's subtle at first, a lingering sense that there's more to life than this. A quiet grief for something you cannot name, a dream you start to forget, a voice that says, "This isn't who I truly am." For some, it comes as burnout. For others, depression. Sometimes it arrives through loss, illness, betrayal. Something interrupts the momentum, and for the first time, you are forced to pause and ask, why am I really here? This is where Jung's psychology becomes not just theory, but a mirror. He saw this shift not as dysfunction, but as an invitation, an inner calling toward individuation, the process of becoming whole. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about integrating the parts of you that you've denied, repressed, or ignored. The parts that never had a place in your persona. The artist in the accountant, the nurturer in the executive, the dreamer in the skeptic, the healer in the wounded. All the forgotten faces you left behind in order to succeed begin to knock on your door, and it can be terrifying. Because for many, this moment feels like failure, like unraveling, like a midlife crisis. But Jung would tell you it's not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. The life you built was real, but now something deeper is asking to emerge. You may begin to question your marriage, your job, your beliefs. You may find yourself weeping at small things, or drawn to art, nature, silence. You may pull away from people who once defined you. You may begin reading books you never considered, drawn to stories that speak to something ancient and unspoken inside you. This is the beginning of the second half of life, though you might not recognize it as such. You may think you're losing yourself, but you're actually beginning to find what was buried beneath all along. And the process is not fast. There are no shortcuts. It often requires solitude, humility, and a willingness to feel lost. Because the map you used until now no longer works. You are not climbing a mountain anymore. You are entering a forest, a place without signposts, a place where logic gives way to intuition. And yet, in that forest, something extraordinary begins to happen. You begin to hear yourself again. You hear the voice you silenced in order to be accepted. You remember the things you once loved before the world told you to be useful. You find a kind of strength that has nothing to do with control and everything to do with surrender. It is the beginning of becoming real, not admired, not efficient, not perfect, but real. And in that space, the work of the second half of life begins. Not the construction of identity, but the uncovering of soul. There comes a moment, often quiet and unannounced, when the noise of the world begins to fade. Not because life itself has slowed, but because your hunger for external validation begins to dissolve. After 40, something within shifts. The applause you once craved doesn't echo the same way. The praise you once chased now feels hollow. And in that stillness, where once there was ambition, there is now something deeper stirring, a whisper from the soul. Carl Jung believed that the soul does not speak in the language of reason or achievement. It speaks through dreams, symbols, intuition, things we are taught to dismiss in the first half of life. Until 40, we are trained to speak in measurable terms, promotions, relationships, possessions, accomplishments. But the soul doesn't care for measurements. It longs only to be heard, to be remembered, to be seen. In the silence that follows your early successes, or even your early failures, you begin to hear it. It may start as a question you can't answer, a strange discontent, a longing that refuses to be satisfied. You wake up in the middle of the night, not with panic, but with an emptiness that makes you stare at the ceiling. You begin to wonder if the life you built is the life you actually wanted, or just the life you thought you were supposed to live. This is not a crisis. It is the soul knocking gently, persistently, asking for your attention. For some, this knock arrives after the loss of a loved one. For others, after achieving a lifelong dream and realizing it brought no lasting joy. Sometimes it's a divorce. Sometimes it's illness. Sometimes it's simply the stillness of a morning where everything feels the same, and that sameness becomes unbearable. These moments strip away illusion. They don't care about your status or your schedule. They arrive with a message. You are more than the life you've built. The soul has waited patiently beneath the persona. It does not rush. It does not demand. But after 40, when the ego begins to loosen its grip, the soul sees its opening. And when it begins to speak, it does not use words. It uses feelings. You may find yourself weeping without knowing why, or laughing at memories that resurface without warning. You may be drawn to certain places, certain books, certain moments from your past that suddenly feel alive again. This is the beginning of soul work. You start to sense that life is not just about survival or success, but about meaning. And meaning is not something you can grasp or plan. It is something you must feel. It arises when you begin to align your life not with what others expect, but with what you secretly know is true. This truth does not come in grand revelations. It comes in small recognitions, tiny awakenings that shift the direction of your life by degrees. You may find yourself needing more solitude, not because you are lonely, but because you are listening. In silence, you begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You reconnect with childhood dreams, creative urges, spiritual questions you once buried. The old map no longer applies. You start following an internal compass. And though the path may look like uncertainty to others, it begins to feel like home to you. Jung called this process individuation. The gradual uncovering of your true self from beneath the layers of adaptation, and expectation. It is not about rejecting the life you've lived. It's about deepening it, integrating the parts of yourself that were left behind, making peace with the contradictions within you. You are no longer trying to be one thing. You are allowing yourself to be whole. This wholeness includes everything you were taught to hide: your sensitivity, your fear, your wonder, your desire for more than material success. And the more you listen, the more these hidden parts begin to show you the way. Not through logic or strategy, but through resonance. Something inside simply feels right. A path feels alive. A decision, though irrational, feels necessary. And the deeper you go, the more you realize that soul is not a concept. It is a presence. It is the part of you that does not age, does not perform, does not seek approval. It is the child, the artist, the mystic, the wanderer, the healer. It is the part of you that still believes in beauty, even after disappointment. That still hopes, even after loss. That still dreams, even when life has been hard. After 40, this part of you becomes louder, not because it suddenly appears, but because you are finally quiet enough to hear it. You begin to make different choices, not necessarily bigger, but truer. You may leave a job that no longer fits. You may return to music or painting or writing. You may finally say the thing you've been afraid to say. You may walk away from something that no longer reflects who you are. These are not impulsive acts. They are the slow, deliberate movements of someone waking up, not to a new life, but to the life they were meant to live all along. And it is not always peaceful. Listening to the soul means confronting pain. It means facing regret, disappointment, shame. But it also means discovering a depth of joy that no achievement ever gave you. A sense of purpose not based on outcome, but on presence. You begin to feel alive not because everything is perfect, but because everything is finally real. This is what the silence after 40 brings. The space to hear yourself. The courage to follow what resonates. The humility to let go of what no longer serves. And the willingness to begin again, not from scratch, but from truth. The descent into shadow. Meeting the hidden self. By the time we reach 40, something ancient begins to stir beneath the surface of our carefully managed lives. It is not polite. It is not convenient. It does not care for schedules or accomplishments. It is what Carl Jung called the shadow, the part of ourselves we were taught to suppress, deny, or disown. And it is precisely at this stage of life, when the ego begins to lose its dominance, that the shadow rises to be seen. Most people misunderstand the shadow. They believe it is only the dark parts: aggression, jealousy, lust, rage. But Jung knew better. The shadow is not evil. It is simply that which is hidden. It contains not only our unacceptable impulses, but also our unlived potential, our forgotten gifts, our silenced creativity, our forbidden passions, our quiet power. Everything we buried to be accepted now knocks on the door asking, "Do you remember me?" And at first we resist. We say, "That's not me." We try to explain it away. We tell ourselves it's just a phase, a mood, a passing confusion. But the shadow is patient. It waits. It shows up in our relationships, in arguments we don't understand, and attractions we can't explain. It speaks through our bodies, through tension, fatigue, illness. It appears in our dreams, in our art, in the fantasies we never dare to voice. It will not be ignored forever. Why now? Why after 40? Because the first half of life is about building a career, a family, a reputation. We are so busy climbing that we have no time to look down. But eventually we reach a ledge. We stop. We look back. And we begin to realize there are parts of ourselves we left behind to get here. The child who loved to dance. The teen who questioned authority. The woman who longed to travel. The man who wanted to cry. These pieces of soul didn't vanish. They simply hid. Now they come to reclaim their place. Meeting the shadow is not comfortable. It often feels like falling apart. You may feel overwhelmed, emotional, easily triggered. You may begin to question everything, your beliefs, your identity, your choices. This is not weakness. This is what Jung called the descent into the unconscious, a sacred process, the necessary dark night before the dawn. And here's the truth few speak about. This descent is not optional. If you ignore it, it shows up in other ways. You project your shadow onto others, seeing in them what you refuse to face in yourself. You sabotage relationships. You repeat destructive patterns. You numb yourself with work, alcohol, screens. But if you are willing to face the shadow, if you are willing to sit with it rather than flee from it, something miraculous happens. You begin to reclaim yourself. You see that your anger has a message, that your envy points to your own neglected desires, that your sadness is not a flaw but a signal. You stop trying to be good and start becoming whole. And wholeness includes everything. The beauty and the brokenness, the light and the dark, the part of you that succeeds and the part of you that self-sabotages. When you hold it all with compassion, the war inside begins to end. This is where true transformation begins. You realize that the shadow was never your enemy. It was your teacher. It was the part of you holding the truths too raw for earlier life. It was the guardian of your authenticity. By facing it, you not only free yourself, you become more capable of loving others, because now, you no longer need them to be perfect. You no longer demand they carry the weight of your own denied self. You become more forgiving, more real, more human. And strangely, life becomes richer. Colors seem brighter. Music touches you deeper. Conversations grow more honest. You laugh more freely. You cry without shame. You feel, truly feel, for the first time in years. And though the world around you may look the same, your inner world is changing. You are no longer trying to be someone. You are becoming yourself. This process cannot be rushed. The shadow doesn't respond to force, it responds to presence. You learn to sit in discomfort without running, to hold pain without fixing it, to ask, what is this trying to show me, instead of, how do I make it stop? This is the work of soul, not to control life, but to listen to it, to trust that everything you feel has meaning, even the hard things, especially the hard things. And when you begin to live this way, something unexpected happens. You begin to feel peace, not because life is easier, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. You accept your complexity. You stop needing to prove anything. You move through the world not with certainty, but with presence, not with answers, but with sincerity. And others feel it. They trust you more, they open to you, because you are no longer hiding. You are no longer pretending. You are finally home in your own skin. This is the descent Jung spoke of, not into darkness but into depth. It is the path of courage, of healing, of becoming. It is not about fixing who you are. It is about meeting who you've always been and welcoming them back with open arms. Embracing the second act, the journey toward wholeness. Reaching 40 is not merely a passage of time. It marks a profound turning point, an awakening to a new way of living that demands courage, honesty, and surrender. The years before 40 were about building, achieving, and conforming. But after this threshold, life invites you into something radically different, the journey toward wholeness. This journey does not follow the familiar paths of ambition or social approval. It is a call to slow down, to listen inward, and to embrace the full spectrum of your being. The fragmented self, divided between the persona and the shadow, the conscious and unconscious, begins a slow process of integration. It is a work of patient and persistent healing. Carl Jung described this as individuation, the process through which the individual becomes whole by embracing all aspects of the psyche, both light and dark, strength and vulnerability. Individuation is not about perfection or escaping pain. It is about living with authenticity, courage, and compassion. The second act of life demands letting go of illusions built in the first half, illusions of control, certainty, and the need to please others. It requires facing uncomfortable truths about yourself and your life and accepting them with kindness rather than judgment. This can feel like a painful shedding. Old roles and relationships that no longer serve your growth begin to fall away. The security of familiar patterns gives way to the unknown. The future suddenly appears less predictable and more fluid. But within this uncertainty lies a hidden freedom, the freedom to become your truest self. In this stage, creativity often blooms in unexpected ways. The rigid structures of earlier life loosen, making room for new forms of expression, whether through art, writing, spiritual practice, or simply living more mindfully. The soul's voice, previously drowned out by the noise of external demands, becomes clearer, guiding you toward choices that resonate deeply. It is also a time of deepening relationships. As you grow more authentic, you attract others who resonate with your true self. Superficial connections lose their appeal, and you seek deeper bonds rooted in mutual understanding and acceptance. Yet embracing this journey is not without challenge. The ego resists losing control. Fear, doubt, and loneliness can arise as you step away from familiar identities and comforts. But these feelings are signs that transformation is underway. The key is to meet these challenges with patience and self-compassion. Rather than pushing forward blindly, you learn to honor your pace and your process. You recognize that growth is not linear. It comes in cycles of expansion and contraction, clarity and confusion. Importantly, this second half of life invites you to embrace paradox, the coexistence of opposites within yourself. Strength and vulnerability, certainty and doubt, joy and sorrow. You learn that wholeness is not about eliminating contradictions, but holding them with openness. Jung believed that this integration leads to a profound sense of peace, a peace that does not depend on external circumstances, but arises from inner harmony. It is a peace born from knowing and accepting yourself fully, even the parts that society once told you to hide. By embracing this second act, you begin to live from a place of authenticity rather than expectation. You step into a life defined not by what you have achieved, but by who you are becoming. And in doing so, you open the door to real freedom, the freedom to live with purpose, passion, and presence. The path may be uncertain and winding, but it is rich with possibility. It invites you to become the author of your own story, not one written by others' demands, but one crafted from the depths of your own soul. This journey after 40 is not about finding a final answer, but about cultivating a lifelong dialogue with yourself, a conversation filled with curiosity, honesty, and love. It is a path of continuous discovery, renewal, and transformation. And so, real life begins, not as an arrival but as an unfolding, a dance between what has been and what is yet to come. The invitation is clear: to embrace all that you are, to courageously step into your true self, and to live fully, deeply, and authentically. As we stand at this profound threshold, remember, real life truly begins after 40, when we finally dare to listen to our soul, embrace our shadows, and step into our wholeness. This journey is not always easy, but it is the most rewarding path you will ever walk. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to join this community by subscribing to the channel. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to take that courageous first step. And if you found value in this video, please give it a like to help others discover it too. Together, let's walk this path of transformation and authenticity. Your journey matters. Thank you for watching.